So, babe, I'm so excited. We're getting ready to go, but I need to get some new shoes. And these shoes are cute. What do you think about these?
They're all right.
Yeah, I like them.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
They're okay.
They're okay. Okay. They're like $25.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Like, is he serious? Like, I'm trying to save him money, and now he wants to act like he doesn't like the shoe? Like, I don't have good style or something? Oh, my goodness. Anyway. Yeah, babe, so you don't seem like you like the shoe.
So are you getting the shoes because they're $25? Or are you getting the shoes because you like the way the shoes look?
I like the shoe. I like the shoe, babe. It fits nice. It's cute. And yes, I am buying them because they're cheap, okay?
She's really getting the shoes because they're $25, but the shoes are ugly.
Okay, listen. I'm picking up on something like you don't like the shoe, right? So guess what? What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put the shoe back. How about that?
That would be a good thing because there's another pair of shoes that I saw down there that looked a little bit better on you. And they're a little bit more than $25, but it doesn't really matter how much they cost. What's important is that they look nice and they're comfortable, right?
I don't like the shoe though. You know what? I'm not gonna go there. I'm gonna leave it alone. I'm gonna go ahead and get the shoe that he said he wants because I don't have time for this. Okay, you know what? Fine. Let's go get the shoe.
Wait. You can get the $25 pair of shoes if you want. That's up to you. So I'm out of this. Those shoes are ugly. I don't want to be near her in them. But if that's what you want, go right ahead, sweetheart.
All right then.
All right. Hello and welcome to When We Talk. I'm Stephen Conway and this is my wife, Tamara.
Hey.
We're so glad that you've joined us because when we talk, we process.
Yes, we do. And when we talk, we enjoy ourselves.
And when we talk, we grow.
Yes. And listen, most importantly, when we talk, we heal.
We heal.
Yes.
We heal. Yeah. But when we don't talk, we experience a conflict hangover.
Oh, my goodness.
Today's show is about avoiding the conflict hangover.
Yeah.
Avoiding what happens when we don't talk.
Yes.
Or maybe we do talk, but we don't really share,
what's
what
on
it
our
is that's on our hearts and on our minds. That's
Yeah.
that's what you just seen. This was a real life event. This was a skit, but you know, like, you know how sometimes on the tagline, the events that you have just seen are a portrayal of real life
events.
Right?
That is our life,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Recently, literally, we just had that experience. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So we try to, because we don't want to get into an argument, we try to avoid saying what we really think about a situation, and we think that that's going to help. But does that really help?
No, it does not help. And oftentimes it's based on perception, right? We perceive that we're headed in the direction of an argument, or we think this is what's going to happen. And so we begin to do that word of the day. Let's just let it be there. Sabotage, right? That's our word of the day, okay? And it just doesn't help.
Yeah, so we're destroying our own attempt at a healthy relationship. So go ahead, babe.
So at the root of that, sweetheart, when it comes to people avoiding conflict, why do they do that? Why do we do it?
Man, there's a lot of reasons. I think one reason is, like, for instance, me, the house I grew up in, there was a lot of conflict. There was, you know, just all types of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And so I just decided I'm not going to do that. I don't want to raise my voice. I don't want to call anybody out of their name. I don't want to argue. I don't want to fight. I don't want to do that. And so this is kind of something that I decided based on the home I grew up in that I didn't want.
Yeah. And sometimes it could be the opposite. It may be because of that, which I'm familiar with growing up in my house as well. But sometimes there came a point in our home where people didn't communicate at all, right? And so there was no resolving of any conflict. And so, some people could say, well, I would rather have the conflict than not. But, our perceptions of what conflict is varies from person to person.
Yeah, and I also, another one, I remember we were having a conversation with a couple, and I can't remember which one, but someone said, man, I never saw my parents have a disagreement.
Yeah.
And so I remember you and I looked at each other like, you never what? No. Like, I never saw my parents have a disagreement.
Yeah.
Now, what that doesn't mean is it doesn't mean that the parents never disagreed. What it means is that they never disagreed in front of their children. And I'll go out on a limb and say that those parents probably thought, man, we're doing a wonderful job because we want, our children to have this perception of unity and whatnot. However, what happened is that their children never learned how to resolve disagreements because they never seen their parents dissolve a disagreement or work through a disagreement with one another.
So we think that we're doing a service, right, by making it a point, perhaps in our homes or maybe on our jobs even. You think that happens when people are at work? They're like, you know what, I'm not going to put up a fuss. I'm not going to say anything, right? But behind the scenes, it's like, yeah, I don't really like what, know?
Yeah. And the other one is, of course, I want to be like Jesus, so I will crucify self, and I will not say what this person is doing that's destroying all of the team's ability to accomplish, but I'm being like Jesus.
Taking shots, huh?
And really, you're not being like Jesus because, there's this thing called passive aggressiveness.
Yes.
That's another word for the day, but passive aggressive, the passive is I never really come out and say. The aggressive part is there's a sense of frustration or just uncomfort with what's going on. And I communicate my displeasure through maybe slamming the door hard or huffing or
making some type of noise, grunting.
all of those things. All of those things can come across with the passive aggressive. So I guess we can say this. Sometimes many of us have good intentions when we are avoiding conflict.
Yeah.
But it doesn't always turn out the way that we expect it to.
Now, when we talk about the word conflict, the word just brings up images in our mind, right? I know for me, in times past, it did. When I thought about conflict, I thought about war. When I thought about conflict, I thought about fighting. What are some images that come up in your mind when you would think about the word conflict in the past?
Well, there's this book called, in Spanish, El Gran Conflicto, right? In English, The Great Controversy.
Yeah.
There's this book, and so it's like, well, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Right?
That
couldn't be good.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing at all. So those are at least some of the images, or, just as you said, people warring, fighting, a contest even.
It took me some time in life, growing and healing, as we talked about in previous segments, that I realized that actually the word conflict has been given a bad rap.
It has.
Right?
It has.
In fact, here's a definition, right? A definition that says a serious disagreement that can be protracted over a period of time. Okay? And, we can be often raised or conditioned, to avoid it and stay away from it at all costs. But can you really avoid conflict? Do you think so?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Perhaps you can avoid conflict, but you can't avoid the fallout of avoiding the conflict, right? So there's always going to be, we haven't talked to Uncle Bob in 30 years. There's always going to be that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I don't know, my mom and her aunt, they just don't talk to one another. And so I really never got to know that side of my family.
Wow.
So while we may avoid the conflict, we don't avoid the fallout that comes from the conflict.
Wow. And again, most of us, we bring to the table these ideas of what we think conflict is, the yelling, the screaming, and so forth and so on. But it actually really is a part of one of the things, at least I believe, that God uses to help us to mature and to help us to grow. And so to avoid conflict is avoiding that process, do you think?
Yeah, it is. It is. And since the title of the show is When We Talk, when we avoid conflict, we're avoiding talking. We're avoiding the sharing. You know, that's what communication, the Latin word communicare means to share.
Communicare, that sounds, ooh.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, don't
Communicare.
worry about it. It just means to share.
Okay.
It just means to share in the
Yeah.
public what had been private. And so when we talk, that's what we do. But when we're avoiding conflict, we are avoiding the conversation that deals with this uncomfortable topic. And so we're not really sharing what our thoughts and our feelings are about a particular thing or person.
So that keeps coming up, right? This conversation about emotions and thoughts and feelings, right? Discussion. There's something that's needed, right? When we talk, there are things that are important in the process, especially when dealing with conflict, right? Because what happens when we have conflict, there tends to be misunderstanding, right? We are missing one another. I'm trying to explain or share something, and maybe my words are not matching with my actions, and so people can get confused. But I'm imagining that in order to have healthy, because that's what we want to have, right?
Absolutely.
Healthy conflict, that words are a part of that and being able to express that. But when we don't have a foundation, that can make it difficult.
Yeah, it does. And this is something that you and I, we talk a lot about. We talk about having an emotional vocabulary. We talk about being able to articulate what it is that's actually that we are feeling, that we are experiencing, so that we can share that with the other person. So many times, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, you let me know, but so many times we can, you mentioned healthy conflict, we can destroy the potential for healthy conflict just because of the words that we use. So for instance, I can say, well, you know, if you hadn't have done this, then when you did X, Y, and Z, it made me so forth and so on.
Yeah.
Well, immediately when I'm using that type of language, you're going to become defensive because I'm accusing you of doing something. But there's a different way and a different words that I can use.
Yeah.
Part of that is taking responsibility. That was a word of the day for one of the other programs on When We Talk. But when I take personal responsibility, then I can say, you know, when this happened, I felt.
Yeah. I felt.
So
wait.
now-
So you mean to tell me you didn't? You made me?
No,
like
no,
you
no.
made me feel.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you made me feel. I'm not saying you intentionally did. I'm not saying you planned to get up and let me destroy his day. None of that. None of that at all.
Yeah.
But what I'm doing is I'm taking personal responsibility and I'm merely sharing what my response was to an event in terms of emotionally, how I felt without the accusation, which frees you to be able to then comment on what your intentions were and so forth and so on. And it's one of the unused tools that can have us to experience healthy conflict.
Something you just said that's really powerful, which is again this idea of words and understanding. It took me a while, but I eventually got to a place where I understood that there are words that mean things to you that don't mean the same thing to me.
Absolutely.
Now, we had experience in the beginning stages of our marriage where I remember we were having a conversation and I used, we were just laughing and talking, and I was like, oh, Stephen, I'm not going to say the word because I don't know if I can say the word on here, right? It's not a derogatory word, but, it was a word that you all don't use, right? It's another word for be quiet.
Yes,
You know?
SHUT/UP. We didn't say it. So here's the thing. That's what you said to me.
I did.
And in my home,
Yeah.
that meant something completely different than it meant in your home.
Yes.
It was almost like a swear word.
Yeah.
Right? In my home, it's like you don't do that, it's disrespectful, so forth and so on. But in your home, that's, you guys just threw that thing around like a football or baseball or softball.
Yeah.
It was normative for you, but it was not for me.
And I remember in that moment when we had that interaction, like your whole countenance changed and it just threw me off. And I was like, what's his problem, right? And it wasn't until you explained that to me that was the first time that I understood the power of how words mean different things to different people, right? And so when you're having conflict, it can completely go over your head that you're actually having this issue with this person because of a word. And you will be battling, but you will never address it because you don't associate it with that. Definitions and listen, even culturally, I believe that can happen to people sometimes, right? That there are certain words and certain phrases in certain cultures that can be offensive or cause just this uproar. And we're like, I don't understand what's wrong with this person.
Yeah.
What's the big deal?
And this is the importance when we talk of not just talking, but also listening.
Ooh.
And when we talk, it's important not to just talk about surface things, but it's also important that we talk in a way that allows the opening of our hearts, vulnerability, and also that allows vulnerability on your part. People are like books, right? And when you're talking, I'm listening to you, and I am quite literally, I am going through the pages of your life. As you're talking, you're sharing with me, and it's like reading a book, experiencing a great book, right? And that's why we have to listen. We have to listen, and when we listen to one another, we have the opportunity to learn about. And that's what can affect the type of words we choose to use.
Yeah.
Because, oh, I know this is a sensitive area. Oh, I know that this is something. And so I can be aware of those things as we're talking.
Now, I don't know about you, but, learning in our relationship, I got really good at listening, sorta.
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 Okay, explain that.
So listening, sorta, is like, I'm here with you, I'm looking at you, but in the back of my mind, I'm calculating of what I'm gonna say next, right? Is that actually really helping in conflict?
No, it's not. I will refer to that as defensive listening. So you are listening, but you aren't. What you're listening for is the rebuttal.
Yes.
How can I undermine his argument?
Yeah.
How can I how can I beat him, or how can I win?
Yeah.
Right? How can I pin him to the mat? Right? And when you're listening just to win, you're not really listening. Your focus is not on hearing the other person's heart, but your focus is on winning, right?
And that's funny you bring that up because you would think winning would be enough, right? That it would feel great, but it's not. I remember being in situations like that where you walk away from a conversation and you've won, but you feel even worse, or your relationship has been kind of like brought further apart. Or severed. And so you may feel good at that moment that the argument, you made your point. However, the relationship is what you want to be able to reconcile, right?
Right.
And that's the most important thing when we're having conflict. The goal is not to separate. Again, we understand in some circumstances you have to, right? Depending on what the conflict is. But the goal of conflict, the blessing, should I say, of conflict is coming to a resolution.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a passage of scripture that comes to mind, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31. Whether therefore you eat, or whether you drink, or whether you argue, I added that, that's the Conway translation.
Yes.
Or whether you engage in conflict, or whatever you do, do it all to the glory of God. And
Wait. So you're saying that even in conflict, we can give God glory?
Yes.
That's completely countercultural.
It is.
For a lot of us.
It is. And the reason why is because we're trying to pin one another. We're trying to win. We're trying to be right. Now raise your hand if you'd like to be right. Okay, yes. So, but having conflict to the glory of God, it puts aside being right. What's most important is not that I'm right. What's most important is not that I win. What's most important is that God is glorified even through this uncomfortable conflict that you and I are walking through.
Isn't that what Jesus did? The King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, even his disciples expected that he would come and take the crown, right? That's what they were looking for, but that's not what he did. He came in this conflict on this earth and he humbled himself and gave his life, right, in order to win the conflict.
That's interesting. It appeared that he lost, but ultimately he was victorious. His quote unquote loss was the it was the linchpin of his victory. And so I think that's important. In conflict, sometimes, and you mentioned it earlier, when we think, oh, I've won, I'm right, what actually ends up is we lose, right? But it reminds me of another passage of scripture. If any man would save his life, he must lose it,
He
right?
must lose it, yeah.
And so we must be willing to experience what may seem like a loss, because I don't get to say the last word. Any of you been there? You know you need to be quiet. You know your lips need to stop moving. You know you should not say one more word, but you cannot help it. You are just moved from deep within, and you have to say it. And you say it, and the moment it comes out of your lips, you know you should not have done it. And you know that the next 2 weeks you're going to be digging yourself out of a hole, but you just had to say it. No, you actually really didn't have to say it. So you won, or it felt like you won in the moment, but the victory was turned into mourning, into defeat, extremely, extremely swiftly.
Wow, that's heavy. I know that there's so many different types of conflicts. One of the areas that I'm growing in, we have children. And, I grew up in a home where, as parents, you're always right. Right? And you don't question, and you don't talk back, right? Because to even actually question was talking back. To even actually express yourself was talking back. And so I know in a lot of cultural contexts that is the case. And I know how frustrated I was as a young person, wanting to be able to raise my hand and say, hey, this hurt me, or I don't like this, or I don't, agree with this. And so I'm learning now as a parent, because the truth is, by beholding you become changed. I know that in the beginning stages of parenting for me, I brought that into my parenting style, but I realized that it doesn't work, right? My child suppressing, their thoughts or their feelings. Now, don't get me wrong now, right? There's a level of disrespect that I'm not going to, deal with. However, it's not true to say that someone sharing what's on their heart is disrespectful.
Just because it conflicts with
what?
With what you think, or with what your perception are. And this is a powerful thought for our friends, those who have children or grandchildren. Would you rather listen to your children in the immediate sense, or would you rather live out a life where your children and grandchildren exhibit resentment and bitterness towards you?
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't understand why they don't want to be around me. I don't understand why they don't want to.
We're always in conflict.
Yeah, like, what is it?
Yeah.
And the reason is that they were never allowed to really share, right? And as a result, that pent up frustration and bitterness and so forth and so on. I don't know about our friends, but I would much rather experience the uncomfort or the discomfort of an in-person conversation now, so that we can move beyond that and have healthy conversation moving forward.
What do you think is the reason why we as parents, or maybe you're a boss, because it doesn't just happen in the home. Maybe there's workplaces where there are people who at all costs will avoid conflict, and so they use their positions as a place to where they won't allow people to confront them, right? And what do you think is the underlying root of that avoidance?
Yeah, well, it could be many things, but we were talking about being right and winning.
Yeah.
If I'm coming from a perspective where I've never been right, and I feel like I've always been on the losing end,
Yes.
but now I'm in a position where my position as a parent or as a supervisor enables me to be right and enables me to get those wins, then I'm now using my relationships and I'm using my job as a place that is going to do things for me in life that I feel like I missed out on. So people are not always conscious of those things, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are conscious and they don't care. Look, I'm going to be right. If anybody's gonna lose anything, it's not going to be me.
Yeah, I think that it's such a huge, it's such an important topic, because the ultimate goal is that conflict prevents us from being able to have success. conflict and not having the conflict doesn't prevent us. Not rightly being able to process through the conflict, because conflict is a part of life, right?
Yeah.
We can't avoid it. It is a part of what matures us and helps us to grow. But when we refuse to engage in the conflict in the right way, in the way that glorifies God, it prevents us from being able to have success in our families. It prevents us from being able to have success on our jobs, to complete missions, to complete projects and things of that nature.
Yeah, man, this is we could say so much more about this. I've noticed that in a church context, this is, and I would, imagine in other work contexts as well, it's extremely challenging to engage in conflict because, as we suggested earlier, there's this, this idea that I have to be a Christian. And a Christian doesn't disagree. A Christian doesn't hold people accountable. A Christian doesn't do assessment on whether a person has done a good job or not. So we end up with mediocrity instead of excellence, all because we are fearful of engaging in healthy conflict.
Confronting it. Yeah. Wow, it's so powerful. Listen, you don't have to be afraid because God is with you in the conflict.
Now you can watch episodes of When We Talk with Stephen and Tamara Conway anytime at 3abnplus.tv or on our 3ABN Plus app for smartphones and tablets.
Discover the keys to healthier family relationships and better communication. Just visit 3abnplus.tv or download the app and search for When We Talk. Put your feet on the path to relationships like God intended them to be.
In Joshua chapter 22, the Bible gives a wonderful illustration of the benefits of when we talk. Some of the tribes were on one side of the Jordan, and they decided that they were going to build an altar. Well, the tribes on the other side of the Jordan got word about the construction of this altar, and they prepared themselves for war. And they march, they cross the Jordan, and they meet up with their brethren, and you can read about it there in Joshua 22. There is an exchange. Why have you set your hearts to rebel against the Lord? After all we've been through, and so forth and so on, they pour their hearts out to their brethren, appealing to them not to do this great sin. And then the response. The response is, oh, this altar is not so that we can rebel against the Lord. This altar is a reminder to our children that even though we're on this side of Jordan, we belong to the rest of the people of God who are on the other side of the Jordan, lest our children should ever forget. This is a powerful illustration, my friends, because war is literally avoided when we talk. The conflict could have been far worse, but it was ultimately a misunderstanding. So many of our conflicts are just that, misunderstandings, because one or both or several of us have not shared what is really going on in our hearts. We want to encourage you today, do not avoid conflict. Allow God to be glorified through conflict. Share, open your hearts, because when we talk, by the grace of God, we heal.